Louisiana versus all y'all. Jarrett Roser here today with Dunham head coach Neil Weiner, who is just trying to get those Tigers ready for another football season amid some really strange off-season circumstances, to say the least. And so we'll talk about kind of both aspects of that, just getting ready for this next go-round with the Dunham football team, as well as from a coach's perspective and being involved in a lot of these conversations with the lead up to a football season that remains somewhat uncertain, but everyone's trying to work toward as close to a level of normalcy as possible. So, Coach, appreciate you, man. I know you have a lot going on, trying to just navigate some of this and keep those guys working and grinding toward a season whenever that may start. So thanks for hopping on. How's everything been going?
Yeah, going good. I need to get some those Dunham Cardinal drapes you got going, those curtains in the background, man. I know you got the red Louisiana versus all y'all shirt, so I appreciate you trying to get some red in the background there. The summer's really gone great. Obviously, it's different. It's different for everybody, and I think that's one of the things that probably coaches across the board can probably deal with it, knowing that everybody is doing it. So nobody's getting a competitive advantage over our school because we're not able to do certain things. We're all in the same boat, and we're all just trying to be as creative and innovative as we can be, and obviously be as safe as we can for our kids. So summer so far has been great. Our numbers are up. We've had great participation, and it's been a fun summer so far.
You guys have had some key pieces graduate and head off to play college ball, including, 2 years ago, it was the Stingley family that was in my ear until I finally got some sort of red Louisiana versus all y'all shirts available. And then obviously a good group following. We just saw not too long ago the news that Rhett would be playing some college ball in Lafayette. And so as you, with this most recent group in particular, as you wish them well on to the next steps of their life, what has it been like to see that transition to this next senior group, and how they've kind of taken the lead? Who have been some guys that have impressed you as they get ready to leave their mark as a senior class on this program?
Yeah, so we're so excited for Rhett Guidry, who'll be going out to Lafayette and ULL and playing tight end for them and signing in this class. Rhett was a really young guy. He was 17-year-old, graduating senior, and he was going to reclassify and go to a prep school and reclassify in the 2021 class. And as soon as he officially did that, all of a sudden he started getting all these Division I offers. Tim Leger at ULL had reached out to me asking for some updated film, and got him a little workout. And then Rob Sale, who's their offensive coordinator, who was actually the offensive line coach at Catholic Point-Capee in 2006, the cradle of coaches out there. He called and said, "Look, we want to offer him right now." And so I was just thrilled for Rhett to be able to get that opportunity to do that right now and not have to postpone that a year. But, Rhett, I think, really is a big hole for us to fill on our team, in a sense that, he was our best player on defense. He was the district MVP on defense, but he was the hardest working guy that we had. He had the most, tremendous amount of heart for our guys. And really, that's a legacy that Derek Stingley started 2 years ago. I mean, Derek was by far the most talented football player that I've ever been around. He's a generational type talent. But the more accolades, the more success and honors he got, the more gracious and humble and hardworking he got. And that's a legacy that he left for our program, that our most talented players are going to be our most hardest working players. And so now we have that going on now. Kalante Wilson was a sophomore running back last year, but was our offensive MVP of the team. And he's kind of picked up that role. I mean, he is always working. He goes 100% in whatever we're asking him to do, but then he goes off and gets some extra work on his own. And so he's able to kind of carry that torch for us, that one of our key players is also our hardest work and has one of our best attitudes. But, in our senior class, we really have some great guys. I would probably leave some out, but, guys that just worked really hard in this off season. Johnny Green is a young man that has been a part of the program since I've been there. These guys that are seniors now, they were on that 5th and 6th grade football team at Dunham when I first got there. And so it's really fun to see these guys grow up and become seniors. and create a winning tradition at Dunham that maybe they didn't experience a whole lot, when they were that young. But Johnny Green is a defensive lineman that's really undersized, but just works his tail off and looks great. He's going to be a great military leader one day. I'm sure he'll be sent on a SEAL team somewhere and take out the next bad guy. But he's been awesome. Blocker Harbison, which is a great offensive lineman name, be called Blocker. He'll be a 3-year starter at right tackle, and he's been tremendous for us and a great leader. He's one of our senior class leaders that we have on campus. Camden Holmes is another kid who's just been a part of the program forever and just works so hard and just loves finishing blocks and knocking people over and getting dirty and getting nasty, and has really helped kind of change the mindset of a lot of our kids. So those 3 guys really stand out as just kind of being blue-collar, hard-working guys that I think have really embraced the offseason and we're looking for big things from them.
You probably touched on it some with just some of the work ethic, attitude, and having your best players be leaders and kind of the way they carry themselves with that graciousness and that work ethic that they bring to it day in and day out. But to lose spring and then get to these limited starts and smaller groups and everything that we're dealing with in the summer, how much have you had an opportunity to have some of the kind of early goal setting type conversations with these guys, or what have you seen in terms of an overall team identity coming together, anything like that the group as a whole kind of carries forward into the fall or whenever we're able to get back out there?
Yeah, not having spring football makes a big difference for us and for our school and the type of program we are, because we have so many kids that we encourage to go play other sports. And we don't have football year round. When I was at Zachary, it was awesome. We had first hour was all the offensive players, second hour was all the defensive players, fifth hour were all the ninth grade players. So you'd have 150 kids that you'd be with every single day throughout the year if you get football work in. And that's just not the case at Dunham. It's just a different schedule and different routine. So we really count and depend on that time during spring to teach and install, but mostly to see kids step up and fill some roles and start to be relied on more. And so we lose that. And now, we're limited on what kind of football stuff we can do. So it's not like we could say, okay, well, we lost Cruz Bridges, who was a 3-year starter at cornerback. Let's see how our corners are looking covered in one-on-one, because we can't do it. And so that part of it hurts. But we get to see the kids working. We're fortunate at Dunham that we do play a lot of young kids. So we have 9th and 10th graders that are on the field, all the time. I think we had 2 freshmen that were starting last year, in the state semifinal game against Lafayette Christian. So, we get to see kind of have an idea of what's coming up. Now, it would be great if we could sit down and talk with these guys one-on-one and say, this is what you did in the spring, this is where we see you going, and this is where you are right now. We really don't have that opportunity to do that because we just don't have that baseline to go with. But just being able to watch the kids work on a daily basis is going to be beneficial.
You've kept an eye on, obviously, as everyone has, what the process to get from where we are overall now as a state to get to the start of a football season. And you've posted some stories looking around the country at what some of the college, the conferences, and you posted the story about the Ivy League, looking at the sports flip and been kind of vocal about some of those opportunities to just kind of pursue what we need to get back to something come this next academic and sports year. Where are we right now with that from your perspective, whether personally or just kind of your takeaways from the bigger conversation with LHSAA folks and other coaches around the area and around the state? Because I was joking with you, it seems like every one of these conversations gets to a certain point and then it ends up being I hope, hopefully this plays out. And so it's kind of a frustrating place to be for guys who are used to really focusing in on details and having a level of control over their program, knowing that everything right now remains so uncertain.
Yeah, coaches love to plan things, there's no doubt about that. I think I got a million ideas on how to handle all this COVID stuff. And, what that'll look like in the fall. But the truth is, we don't know right now. I mean, it's July 7th, and we don't play real football until, the first Friday of September, or I guess technically because of the calendar, it'll be the last Friday of August this year. But, we got a lot of time before it's time to kick off. And so there's a lot of things that could change. And, I'm going to be positive and upbeat, but at the same time, we have to be realistic. I think at this point, making any definitive declarations or statements are just not the most wise thing to do right now. I do know that playing in the Superdome is a big, big deal. When the select schools, the majority of the select schools voted to play their championships elsewhere, that crushed me. I'm a coach's kid. I grew up and my dad coached in the Dome, and I still have the picture of me in my, white sweatpants pulled up to my armpits almost as a little guy, posing and taking that picture of my dad at the game. And I've got a son that's playing for me now. And, I dream about him being on that Superdome carpet with me, coaching in a state championship game, and him playing and making plays out there. And, two Decembers ago, I had to come home and tell him as a ninth grader, hey, you'll never get a chance to do that. So that's tough. I value the experience to be at the Superdome. At the same time, who cares about the Superdome if we don't get to play football? We need to be playing football. Our kids need that. And so, that part of it shouldn't dictate the way that we operate our calendar. And I don't think it will either. I know Mr. Bonin had a statement in the paper, and that was specifically that's what he wants, and that's okay. That's what we all want. But what we want isn't always what we get. And so right now we've got to deal with the circumstances that we have. So I've been a proponent of testing out and questioning and planning out what a swap would look like. I don't want to swap. Football's supposed to be on Friday nights in the fall, and baseball's supposed to be in the spring, and basketball's supposed to be in the winter. Like, that's the way it is, and it's like that for a reason. So we want to keep it that way. But if we can find a way that all kids can play all sports, like always, well, let's not take that off the table. I think the biggest negative for that would be if there was another outbreak, there was another surge, we had to have a lockdown, stay-at-home order. Then if we move those spring sports to the fall this year, then you're talking about a possibility of those kids losing 2 years in a row, and that would be heartbreaking. Nobody wants that. If that was something that we were going to do, in my opinion, once we were allowed to come back, those spring sports need to be able to finish their season, and then the rest of the seasons will just have to be shortened so that everybody can get their sports in. But we can't do anything that would jeopardize somebody losing their seasons, which is why we talk about a possible swap, because in phase 2 and in phase 3, those low risk and moderate risk sports that are LHSAA and NFHS is labeled, they can play. And so if we're sitting there twiddling our thumbs in the fall as football coaches, and that's it, and everybody else is playing, that's going to be heartbreaking to our entire state and to a lot of our schools that depend on football finances to help, secure budgets for the rest of the sports.
Yeah, the Superdome piece that you mentioned was so interesting to me for so many reasons, I guess. And Mr. Bonin and company are used to having very heated conversations right now over just the way the football postseason and now other sports postseasons are going to play out. And now those conversations carry somewhat, and that foundation of some of the disagreements through the years carry into now a pandemic circumstance where you see some coaches respond that the dome doesn't matter. And I think I'm with you that as soon as that news came out, I talked to a lot of kids around the state, and the dome very much mattered to a lot of them on both sides of a select non-select split. It's just a really cool experience. Not that a Tulane or a UL isn't, but the Superdome is, I think it's become such an established tradition of folks wanting to get to the dome. But at the same time, if you can't, like you said, if you can't play football, then you're not really playing football in the dome at any point anyway.
Yeah. Hey, in 2005, when all those teams won state championships in the Independence Stadium, they didn't say, well, this sucks because we weren't in the dome. I mean, it was still an awesome deal, and it's a big deal. And we couldn't play in the dome, so we made an adjustment. And so it's now the same thing. If we can't play in the dome, well, we got to make an adjustment.
I know there was some reaction to to Mr. Bonine's comments, and I'd asked Gabe Fertitta over at Catholic about this a couple days ago, because Coach Monica at St. Charles had mentioned there are some seasons where, because of storms, a week or two gets lost, certainly for teams around the southern portion of the state. If this thing gets to a point where it looks like football can be played in the fall, but that it can't start until, say, 2 weeks later,
Yeah.
is that still a viable plan? At what point does football have to just be entirely switched versus being abridged and it still being worth having the season in the fall? Do you have any kind of perspective or read on that?
I mean, I think it's tough to put a number on it necessarily, like how many games counts for, makes it feel like a real season. Because the truth is, it's kind of like what we talked about. If we're not going to be able to play a full season in the fall, let's talk about doing a swap. Well, then there's a chance that we're going to have to come back again, and then you're going to have a shortened season again. So I think we're looking at shortened seasons maybe across the board for all sports. I think fall, winter, and spring may have to look at just having shortened seasons so they can all get in. They've got schools right now that are graduating in July. So it's not like a baseball season in the spring couldn't be extended into June for a week. I think those kids that make it that far to the state tournament, semifinals, state final, they can put the senior trip off for a couple of weeks and go play for a championship with their teammates. I think they would be all right. So when I start looking at a shortened season, Coach Monica is absolutely right. I mean, it seems like every 2 or 3 years, there's some kind of storm that comes through and somebody is going to lose a week 1 or a week 2. That shouldn't diminish the season, losing a week or 2, as far as saying, hey, we got to swap. I think if we start looking at, well, we can't start playing football until October, I think that's really when we need to start seriously contemplating some type of swap. And look, I'm up for anything. If the NFHS, the National Federation of High School, which is our association is a member of, but we're not governed by them. They don't give us our rules necessarily. They say that the basketball and soccer is considered a moderate risk sport, and those can be played in full speed competition during phase 3. So, man, let's let soccer play in the fall. Let's let basketball play in the fall and put football outside in the winter. Take wrestling and move it into the spring, because quite honestly, you don't really have many wrestlers that play baseball or run track. Usually those wrestlers are football wrestling guys, if they're going to be dual sports. So, it doesn't have to be a fall spring swap. It could be a fall and winter swap and keep the spring as it is. I just think everything should be on the table. But, Jared, I mean, like if we're going to be realistic about it, okay, we're going to be in phase 2 for a minimum 7 weeks. So does anybody really think that phase 3 is just going to last 2 weeks? I mean, it's not. If we get put into phase 3, it's going to be at least 3 or 4 weeks. So if everything stays on schedule like that, you're talking about August 17th before we're out of phase 3. Okay. Well, there is no phase after phase 3. Like there's no documented phase 4. Okay. So there's just phase 3, and then nobody knows what's after that. And, the documentation that the LHSAA put out, which was outstanding based on what we all thought the phases and calendar would look like, it was helping schools kind of reorient and phase things back in. Okay. Well, we all thought that phase 2 would be over with at the end of June. In July, we'd be in phase 3. That's what everybody assumed. So the rules and the guidance that the LHSAA came up with made sense if you look at that calendar. Well, now it doesn't make a lot of sense now that we know that all of July is basically going to be phase 2. Okay. So if we're going to play football in the fall, I think the LHSAA is going to have to come back and change their guidances for what you're allowed to do during phase 3, because in phase 3 you still can't put on pads and tackle. You can play one-hand touch 7-on-7 football, and that's it. And you can't even do that against another team. You can only do that within your own team. So to jump from one-hand touch amongst your own team to playing full speed contact with other schools, that's a huge jump, and that's not going to be phase 3 to just go ahead and go get it. So there's going to have to be a transition time. So if we're going to play football in the fall, I really think that our LHSAA needs to come up with some new guidelines that are kind of updated with the timetable that we'll have in order for us to play in the fall.
And you praised some of what the LHSAA has done in terms of just keeping engaged and keeping informed. Talked about Coach Held and everything he's done with the Coaches Association. I think often that group in the office on Old Hammond Highway ends up in a very no-win situation, just in terms of the way that they have to proceed and manage things. So if you could, just sharing some more on it doesn't tend to be an enviable role to be in that office, and just your thoughts on how they've done so far through at least these past few months of this, and kind of keeping the communication going.
Yeah, I mean, in that type of role, I mean, in any leadership role, anytime you communicate to the public, you're not going to make people happy on both sides. It's just not. I mean, you look at your own Twitter account and people are going to disagree. You could post something without comment and all of a sudden it's going to start, a fight on Twitter. So those kind of things just are going to happen. And in that position, when you're talking about, people's children being able to play sports, there's going to be a lot of passion, a lot of emotion that comes with that. And so I really do. I commend Eddie Bonine and his staff for doing the best that they can with the situation that we're dealing with. I thought it was the right move to hold everybody off until that June 8th date so that everybody had a chance to kind of catch up because, there are discrepancies between the quote-unquote haves and have-nots. From a private school perspective, our school, we were ready to go. We had already met. We had everything planned, and we were excited. We were ready to go, and we were going to get a competitive advantage over our public school counterparts right here in East Baton Rouge because they were going to have to listen to their school board, and their school board said, we're not ready to do this. So I thought the LHSAA was right in coming in and saying, hey, we're going to give everybody this chance to get things straight, and we're all going to start at the same time. I thought that was great. The guidances that they gave as far as what we're supposed to do in phase 2 and phase 3, I think were accurate, like I said, based on the calendar that we all thought we'd be dealing with. So I think they've done a great job. Obviously, Mr. Bonine's quotes about the Superdome and, hey, we lose week 1, we lose week 1, we lose week 2, we lose. Well, that kind of sounds flippant, but I don't really think that's probably how he wanted that to come out. I think he wants his stance known that he's going to fight hard for us to keep football as a traditional fall sport and celebrate it in the Superdome and the Prep Classic like we've done for years. And there's nothing wrong with him wanting that and want to stay with that the best he can. But that's certainly not an easy job to have. And, it opens yourself up for criticism anytime you're a leader and you have to make tough decisions.
And I don't know if you'd say similarly or on the flip side, but you had some thoughts when Senator Cleo Fields recommended that sports be canceled for the fall, and that being an opportunity for unification among coaches and athletes and families across the state, just on a mindset of not wanting to hear that, particularly not wanting to hear that this early with so much time still ahead before we get to that point. So what were your reactions to that, and what have the conversations been like with some other coaches as you guys just gauge how to react to that sort of?
I thought it was first of all, I got a text from one of our dads, one of our senior parents who said, did you hear Senator just asked to cancel all sports? I was like, no, where was that? Like, is that in Wyoming? I mean, like, where is that? And no, that'd be here in, Baton Rouge. And so I immediately went and looked it up, and there it was, and of course I sent it to a couple of coaches, and a couple of coaches sent it to me, and then it kind of spread like wildfire with everybody, seeing that. And yeah, I mean, it is. It's just, I think it's kind of, I don't know Mr. Fields at all. I'm sure he's a wonderful guy, and a lot of people automatically started criticizing things that have nothing to do with with education. He serves as the chairman of the committee on education, and people wanted to cite crime statistics and things like that. Like, I mean, I get that. Yeah, crime statistics are bad, but like, he's speaking about education and his role. And so I think he feels like, hey, I don't think we need to be playing, and this is how I can lead in this area. And he did it. I just think it's the wrong thing. And I think the court of public opinion is found him guilty on that as well. We've got a lot of different opinions between baseball coaches and football coaches, or private and public, or rural and metro. But I do believe that everybody can come together and say, that's a terrible, terrible idea. And, I can laugh about it. And I that's, look, I really use Twitter for humor more than anything. A lot of people use it for really serious things, and God bless them. I'm glad you do as well. I use it to laugh and make funny comments and stuff. But the truth is, I linked an article later on. Wisconsin did a study of their student athletes, their athletic association, and it showed that after sports were canceled in the month of May, that 68% of their student athletes, felt some type of symptoms from depression or anxiety, and that was a 35% increase on any previous study they've done. And I've got kids myself that are high school athletes that are in my house. My son, I got a daughter that's entering high school and plays volleyball for Dunham. And I can tell you that's real. Like kids have struggled adjusting, not being in school every day and seeing their teachers and seeing their friends, but they miss just real practice. Now the summer has helped being able to get together with coaches and kids and work out. But that's a real thing that the kids are dealing with. And so, you start canceling sports just say, well, we got to keep them safe. I think it's more dangerous to keep that away from them. And look, I understand if people have a problem with football or other high risk, transmission of the virus type sports, that's fine. But man, our swimmers, swimming in chlorine water, I think they're safe, from the virus getting them. I think our cross country runners, running in the open space, I think they're okay. I think our volleyball players are okay. So, we don't need to be canceling sports for the fall. I think it's a little much right now.
Some of that mental health side of things is something that I've thought, I guess, in terms of sports psychology, sports mental health, I've thought a lot more about in recent years, chatting with my friend Dejanay Green, who is in sports psychology and works down at UNO now, and just recognizing how big of a role athletics plays in the lives of a lot of these young people, and how much losing it, whether it be injury or whatever the case may be, can affect them. And then throughout the early stages of the pandemic, just thinking about all these kids, not just high school age, but younger, being at home and not having quite the same socialization at such critical developmental times is stuff that I don't think we necessarily realize or factor in quite to the extent that it really plays such a huge role in their lives.
Yeah, well, just think about it. I mean, for your own sake, for my own sake, the adults that are all of a sudden out of their routine and stuck in their home, that takes a toll on you. It really does. So you take kids who really, they may want to rebel and act like they don't care and sometimes and things like that and want to be their own guy or girl, but they thrive on that routine and what they expect to happen every day. For the most part, most of the kids are dealing with coaches that are going to be building them up and speaking life to them and, holding them accountable and push them to reach their best. And so when they don't have those things anymore, they might not be getting it at home. And so, or, they might be all by themselves. And so it really is dangerous to kind of be away when you start to grow accustomed to that and start to find an identity in those things. It's dangerous when those things get taken away. And so the mental health aspect, I mean, I think across the board in our country is just a huge topic, way over my head. But it's real. It's not just, get out of your feelings kind of stuff like that. Just get over it. That's just not the way it works. And I've had to learn that in my own personal life, and dealing with loved ones that I have and even myself. I can go days where I'm struggling to motivate myself for different things because I'm out of my routine. And you can say, well, just push on and push through. And most people do. That's how they function and get through life. But that's not the healthy way to do it. And so I think the mental aspect of it is really key for all of our coaches and adults to understand what our kids are going through.
No doubt. Do you think there are any aspects of the conversation as we look at sports for the fall or for the upcoming school year that are being kind of missed? I think we've probably hit on a couple that are being overlooked a little bit, particularly with some of those mental impacts and whatnot on high school athletes or just student athletes or students of all ages. But do you think that most of the key points we've either hit on or are being pretty consistently hit on in public conversation?
I think so. Man, I just I know kids, they need to be in school. I know that's just important. And I know every school board out there is trying to make the right decisions and do the best they can. Some people are talking about doing the A/B schedules and things like that. And I think what a lot of people need to understand, they're not doing that because they're afraid of kids interacting and transmitting the disease. They're doing it because in order to follow guidelines, they don't have enough classroom space to manage a full class. Um, we're fortunate. I'll brag on Dunham for just a second. Like, we're fortunate because our class size is so small that at this point we don't think that we need to do that, because we can spread out and be okay. But man, there's a lot of schools that are not like that, and so especially in our public schools that are overcrowded in a lot of the facilities they have already, it's going to be really difficult, for them to have those normal schedules. And so I think that's important, that our kids just need to be at school. For a lot of kids, the only time that they're going to get, a meal, when they know they're going to get a meal, is at school. And so, making sure that they can just have that normal routine. And I know there's been a lot of groups and a lot of school systems that have tried to provide that throughout the quarantine and even during the summer, but it's becoming more and more difficult because of the restrictions out there. And so you got kids who just don't have basic necessities, and that's not good, obviously physically, but mentally and emotionally that can wear on them as well. And I'm sure you've talked. I think you touched on it with Gabe. How you might have some of those guys that are borderline guys that going in their senior year that they've been working hard and finally going to get a chance to get evaluated and get some film. And man, now they might not. You hate that for those kids. Obviously there's still opportunities. If that doesn't work out, they can go walk on. I mean, if you want to play ball, you can find a home somewhere. Most of the time, coaches are going to work hard to help you. You can go walk on and earn that scholarship, which is not easy to do, but it can be done. But they need to have that senior year, But then the truth is, 9 out of 10 players are not playing at the next level, and their whole high school career and childhood has been built up, towards this. For me personally, my son's going to be a junior. He's got 2 seasons left, and the truth is, who's to? I'm an optimist. I'm positive, but why is it going to be better in March if we switch it to spring? Well, how do we know if we're going to get out of this phase, and what's that going to look like the next fall? So, man, it hits home to parents, who start looking at it and go, well, my son or my daughter is going into their senior year of high school. I only got 1 year left with them before they leave the house. That's difficult enough as it is, but now they won't even get to have sports. So there's a lot of those things that I think need to be considered and just thought about it. And not that people aren't, but as administrators, sometimes we lose sight of that because we're so focused on the calendar and we got to make sure we get our checklist and we do this and do that. Sometimes we forget about the emotional part of it and the human part of it.
Certainly a lot of concerns and a lot of question marks still trying to sort through as we hopefully end up seeing each other here on a Friday night before long without the indoor curtain and TV background and actually get some football behind us.
That's right. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Coach, I appreciate you taking some time and sharing y'all's perspective over there at Dunham, as well as just kind of football coaches hashing through some of this as we try and navigate it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jared, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate your voice for our state, for our high school kids, and man, you've been doing a great job. I think the first time that you and I talked was probably about Lindsey Scott when he was a 10th grader at Zachary. So I don't see quite as many I Spy Jarrett hashtags anymore. Maybe you get too old for that. The kids, maybe some of those kids don't recognize you anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think at least this year so far I've been inside my apartment more than I've ever been inside any residence of mine, even from childhood. But I think I'm, as they say, I'm getting a little bit washed, so to speak. I'm old and outside of the fun age range for those guys too. So I'm not living on the I Spy Jarrett Twitter feeds of some of these kids. But thanks again, man. Again, he's Coach Neil Weiner over at Dunham, getting those Tigers ready for, whatever form of football seasons and sports seasons await in the fall and then in the spring. And for Louisiana versus all y'all, Jarrett Roser. Thanks again, man.
All right. Thanks, Jarrett.